Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. And, the drill, hit the bell icon too so you don't miss any future deep dives.
Yeah.
All right, so today we're taking a closer look at something that's super important for anyone who wants to really understand India's economy,
Mm-hmm.
especially, for those of you prepping for the UPSC exams out there.
Absolutely.
We're talking about India's livestock and fisheries sectors.
Right.
And believe it or not, these sectors contribute a whopping nearly 30% to India's agricultural GDP.
It's a big chunk.
It is. And we've got a whole bunch of sources to dig into today covering a really interesting range of topics. Like, we're going to be talking about everything from, ancient indigenous cattle breeds
Oh, wow.
to, like, cutting-edge stuff like open-sea cage farming.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
It is. And just to kind of, pique your interest a little bit, we're going to be revealing a statistic about India's global ranking in milk production.
Okay.
That might just surprise you.
All right, I'm intrigued.
So yeah, get ready to dive deep with us as we explore these vital parts of human and economic geography.
I'm excited. What I find really interesting about these sectors is that their impact goes way beyond just the numbers and figures,
Right.
They're really deeply connected to India's rural economy. They're providing livelihoods for so many people and acting as a safety net.
Yeah, it's about more than just economics.
For millions of people, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And speaking of numbers and figures, here's that statistic I promised you earlier. India is actually the world's largest milk producer.
Wow, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, it's kind of easy to forget sometimes, right?
Yeah.
But it's a huge testament to how successful Operation Flood was. That program launched back in 1970.
Yeah.
It really revolutionized the dairy sector.
Operation Flood was a game changer, no doubt about it. It really empowered dairy farmers by setting up this cooperative model. And it boosted milk production so much, and it set a precedent that we still see shaping the industry today.
So it wasn't just about increasing the amount of milk being produced. It was
Yeah.
really like a whole social and economic transformation.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, it went hand in hand with those changes. And, it's really important to remember that livestock in India, it's not just about milk.
Right.
It's a source of income. It creates employment, and it even acts as a kind of insurance against the uncertainties that come with agriculture.
Yeah, like a living safety net.
Exactly, a safety net for millions, especially in those rural areas.
And, in our sources, we came across these kind of intriguing terms, revolutions associated with different parts of livestock farming.
Oh, yeah.
So we've got the blue revolution for fish, the brown revolution for leather, golden revolution for honey. Kind of a colorful way to describe agricultural progress.
Yeah, it is catchy, isn't it? But, these terms, they do highlight how diverse the livestock sector really is.
Yeah.
Each of those revolutions represents a significant leap forward in production, in technology, and ultimately in its impact on the economy as a whole.
And this sector in particular, it plays a really key role in poverty reduction strategies.
Absolutely.
Right. Especially for women and smaller marginal farmers.
Yeah, it's a lifeline in many cases. Livestock provides this crucial source of income and empowers people in these rural communities
Uh-huh.
where other opportunities might be very limited. It's a sector that can really drive positive social change.
Absolutely. And, the economic survey of 2019-2020 pointed out that the government is really focusing on these breed improvement programs, particularly the Rashtriya Gokul mission. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Sure. The Rashtriya Gokul mission is all about conserving and strengthening those indigenous cattle breeds that are so important.
Yeah.
It's a crucial step in protecting biodiversity and making sure those traditional livestock practices that have been around for so long stay relevant and sustainable for the future.
So it's about balancing modernization with preserving this valuable indigenous knowledge.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance. But, even with all these positive initiatives, the livestock sector in India, it's still facing some pretty big challenges.
Right, yeah. It's not all, rosy revolutions.
Right.
Our sources point out some serious issues, especially when it comes to productivity.
Yeah, that's a major one. Productivity levels in India, they're relatively low compared to the global average.
Okay.
For example, Indian cattle, on average, produce less milk than cattle in other countries.
Interesting. So what are some of the factors contributing to this lower productivity?
Well, there's a few things. Disease outbreaks are a big one, like foot and mouth disease. It can have a devastating impact on livestock health, and of course, that affects productivity.
Of course.
And unfortunately, the sector has historically been neglected in terms of funding and support.
Really?
Yeah, and that's led to insufficient infrastructure.
So you're talking about a lack of resources for things like fodder cultivation, artificial insemination, and even proper slaughtering facilities?
Exactly. Those are critical gaps that need to be addressed if we want to see the sector reach its full potential.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's the environmental concerns. Livestock farming, especially cattle, contributes to methane emissions, which are a potent greenhouse gas.
It's a tough situation, isn't it?
Mm.
Trying to balance the need to increase production with the need to protect the environment.
Right.
But it sounds like the government is trying to tackle these challenges head on.
Mm.
Our sources mention initiatives like the National Livestock Mission and the Animal Husbandry Infrastructure Development Fund.
Yeah, those represent a really multi-pronged approach to strengthening the sector.
Mm-hmm.
The National Livestock Mission is focused on some really key areas, like fodder development,
Okay.
skill development for farmers, technology transfer, and importantly, disease control programs like the FMDCP for foot and mouth disease.
And what about this Animal Husbandry Infrastructure Development Fund?
Oh, that's a game changer. When it comes to attracting investment, it's designed to encourage the development of infrastructure that's desperately needed. Things like dairy processing plants, meat processing facilities, and even modern animal feed plants.
It's good to see these targeted efforts to modernize the sector.
Yeah.
Really address the limitations that have been holding it back.
Yeah, and then there's this really interesting scheme called the GOBAR-DN scheme. Yeah, it might sound a little strange, but it's actually very innovative. It stands for Galvanizing Organic Bioagro Resources.
Okay. I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
Okay, so it tackles two big problems at the same time.
Right.
First, it promotes village cleanliness by encouraging proper management of cattle waste and other organic waste.
Okay.
And second, it aims to actually create wealth from that waste by promoting biogas production and other ways for people to generate income from it.
It's a win-win situation.
Exactly. Cleaner environment and new economic opportunities for rural communities.
It's a great example of how, creative thinking can lead to these sustainable solutions that really benefit both people and the planet.
Absolutely.
Now let's talk about the 20th Livestock Census.
Ah.
This report gives us some valuable insights into the trends we're seeing in livestock populations across India.
Uh-huh.
What are some of the key takeaways from that?
Well, the census shows an overall increase in livestock population,
Okay.
which at first glance seems like a good thing, for the growth of the sector.
Uh-huh.
But it also reveals some interesting trends within certain categories.
Okay.
So, for instance, while the overall cattle population has increased, there's a noticeable rise in crossbred cattle, but
Yeah.
unfortunately a decline in indigenous breeds.
Oh, that's interesting. Why do you think there's a decline in indigenous breeds, even though the overall cattle population is going up?
Well, it comes down to milk yields. Crossbred cattle, like those with Jersey or Holstein genes, tend to produce more milk compared to the indigenous breeds.
Ah, I
So
think
farmers are naturally drawn to the breeds that will give them the most output.
that makes sense.
Plus, the government has been promoting sex-sorted artificial insemination,
Mm-hmm.
which increases the chances of female calves being born, which, of course, further boosts milk production.
So it's great that milk yields are going up, but there's a potential downside.
Yeah.
We might be losing that valuable genetic diversity that comes with the indigenous breeds.
Yeah, that's a valid concern. Indigenous breeds are adapted to the local conditions.
Right.
They often have unique traits like resistance to certain diseases. It's really important to find that balance between maximizing productivity and making sure we don't lose those precious genetic resources.
It's a delicate balancing act for sure.
Yeah.
Were there any other interesting trends highlighted in the census data?
Yeah, one positive trend is the big rise in backyard poultry.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and this is great news, particularly for poverty alleviation efforts. Backyard poultry farming is relatively easy to manage.
Mm-hmm.
It provides a really readily available source of both income and nutrition,
Yeah, that's fantastic.
especially for rural households.
It's incredible how much we've already learned about the livestock sector.
It's a big topic.
And we haven't even touched on fisheries yet.
I know, right?
But before we jump into that, let's just take a quick recap of what we've discussed so far.
All right, sounds good.
So it's clear that India's livestock sector plays a really vital role in the nation's economy. It provides livelihoods, it contributes significantly to food security, and acts as a form of social security for so many people.
Yeah, it's essential.
We've talked about the impact of initiatives like Operation Flood
Right.
and the challenges posed by things like low productivity, inadequate infrastructure, and environmental concerns.
Mm-hmm.
But we've also seen how the government is implementing these really innovative solutions, like the National Livestock Mission, the Animal Husbandry Infrastructure Development Fund, and the Gobardian scheme
Yeah, lots of progress being made.
to address these issues and push the sector forward.
Yeah.
And then the 20th Livestock Census gave us a snapshot of how things are evolving,
Yeah.
revealing some positive developments like that growth of backyard poultry,
Mm-hmm.
but also highlighting some areas that need careful attention,
Right.
like that decline in indigenous cattle breeds.
Yeah. It's a complex sector, isn't it?
It is.
Full of potential, but also with some significant challenges. But with strategic planning, innovative solutions, and a focus on sustainability, I think India's livestock sector can continue to thrive and contribute to the nation's well-being, both economically and socially.
I agree. And, speaking of thriving sectors, are you ready to cast our nets wide now and explore the depths of India's fisheries sector?
Oh, absolutely. I'm ready to dive into that. It's a world teeming with potential, and I've got some really surprising facts and insights to share.
Well, let's do it then.
So India's got this incredible coastline, stretches over 7,500 kilometers.
Wow, that's huge.
It is. And get this, we have access to the Indian Ocean, which is actually the least exploited ocean in the whole world when it comes to fishing.
Really? You'd think with a coastline that big, we'd be fishing like crazy everywhere.
You would, right?
Seems like there's a lot of untapped potential there.
There definitely is. But even with, relatively low levels of exploitation, India is still the second largest fish-producing nation globally.
No way. That's our second mind-blowing statistic of the day.
Okay.
Okay, I'm impressed. But hold on, before we get too deep into this, I need a little clarification. We keep using these terms, marine, inland, aquaculture.
Right.
Can you break those down for me and for our listeners? What exactly do they mean?
Yeah, definitely. It's important to distinguish between the different types of fisheries we're talking about. So marine fishing, pretty straightforward. That's fishing in the sea.
Okay,
Inland fishing takes place in freshwater bodies like rivers, lakes, reservoirs.
got it.
And then there's aquaculture, which is basically like farming, but instead of fields, you're using ponds, lakes, or even sections of the ocean. It's a really interesting way to boost food production from these aquatic sources.
So when we say India is the second largest fish producer, that includes all three types combined?
Exactly. And here's another interesting fact. A big chunk of India's fish production, something like 71%, actually comes from inland fisheries.
Oh, wow. I would have thought marine fishing would be the main source, considering, how long our coastline is.
Yeah, it might seem counterintuitive, but think about it. India has this massive network of rivers, lakes, and ponds.
Sure, yeah.
All those inland water bodies offer tons of opportunities for both fishing and aquaculture.
That makes sense. And you mentioned earlier that India is the second largest aquaculture nation globally. Does that tie back to the Blue Revolution that we were talking about before with livestock?
It does. The Blue Revolution, which started in the 1970s, played a huge role in boosting fish production, especially through aquaculture. And if you're thinking about a specific type of aquaculture that really took off, it was shrimp farming. Andhra Pradesh became a major hub for shrimp production. They even call it the shrimp capital of India.
So we've got Gujarat leading in marine fishing on the west coast, Andhra Pradesh making waves in shrimp aquaculture. It's like different regions are specializing in different things. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's fascinating to see those regional strengths develop.
But alongside all this progress, there must be some challenges too, right?
Oh, absolutely. Despite all the success, both marine and inland fisheries face a bunch of obstacles. Poverty among fishing communities is a major issue,
Yeah, of course.
and access to technology and infrastructure varies a lot. The adoption of modern techniques like, better fishing gear and preservation methods, it's often limited,
Yeah.
especially for those traditional fishing communities.
And I'm guessing essential infrastructure like fishing, harbors, cold storage facilities,
Right.
good transportation networks, those are probably lacking too.
Yeah, especially in more remote areas. Those gaps in infrastructure really hold the sector back. And then there's the whole issue of seasonal limitations.
Right.
The monsoon season, tropical cyclones, those can disrupt fishing activities pretty significantly.
It makes sense. When you're relying on nature, it can be unpredictable.
Exactly. And we can't forget about the problem of overfishing either.
Right.
When you fish too much, it depletes the fish stocks, and it can really mess up that delicate balance in marine ecosystems.
Like that classic tragedy of the commons scenario.
Exactly. Everyone's acting in their own best interest, but it ends up harming the shared resource. Finding that balance between maximizing how much we catch and ensuring there's enough fish for the future is absolutely crucial.
Definitely a tightrope walk.
Yeah.
You mentioned deep sea fishing before. What's so unique about that type of fishing, and what are some of the challenges and opportunities that come with it?
Well, deep sea fishing means venturing out into those deeper waters, usually beyond the continental shelf, at depths of, 200 meters or more.
Wow.
It requires big mechanized fishing vessels equipped with all the latest gear and refrigeration on board to handle the catches.
It sounds intense.
It is. It's a whole different world compared to fishing in coastal waters.
Yeah, I bet the investment required for that kind of operation is pretty significant.
Oh, it definitely is. And then there's the navigational challenges of operating in those deeper waters. Things like GPS systems, including India's own Enervix system, become super important. The potential benefits are huge, though. You can tap into fish stocks that haven't been exploited as much that could
Hmm.
really help boost fish production and food security, but we have to be careful.
What kind of concerns are there surrounding deep sea fishing?
Well, if it's not done sustainably, it could lead to overfishing, and that could damage those fragile ecosystems down there. It's vital to have sustainable fishing practices and regulations that protect those environments. Plus, deep sea fishing can be really dangerous. It poses risks to the fishermen themselves.
It's a tough call, isn't it?
Yeah.
Weighing the potential economic benefits against the need to protect the environment and the safety of the people doing the work. Are there any alternative approaches to deep sea fishing that could be more sustainable?
Yeah, there are. One really promising option is open sea cage farming.
What's that?
So picture this, a floating cage anchored out in the open ocean. And inside the cage, you raise fish. Typically, they're hatchery-produced seedlings.
Citrus?
Fishermen regularly feed the fish and maintain the cages. And institutions like the Central Marine Fishery Institute, they provide training and support.
So it's like creating this controlled environment for fish farming, but right out in the open sea. That's really cool. What are some of the advantages of doing it that way?
Well, there are a few. First of all, it allows us to increase fish production without causing all the damage that comes with things like trawling, those more destructive fishing methods.
Right.
And it can create new economic opportunities for those coastal communities. And it reduces the pressure on those wild fish stocks.
Sounds like a win-win for both the economy and the environment. So we've talked about the challenges the fisheries sector is facing, but what about some of the successes and strategies for the future? Are there any examples of innovative approaches that are working really well?
Oh, yeah, definitely. There are some inspiring success stories from different states across India.
Like what?
For example, Gujarat has seen great results by switching from a cooperative-based system for leasing ponds to a public auction model.
Interesting.
By making the leases longer and introducing competition, this change encouraged private entrepreneurs to invest in improving things like the pond infrastructure, managing the water resources more effectively, and enhancing security to prevent poaching.
So it's about creating the right conditions for private investment to come in and drive those innovations.
Exactly. And other states like Jharkhand and Andhra Pradesh have implemented cage fisheries in these large reservoirs, and they're seeing promising results.
Oh, wow.
By using existing reservoirs for cage aquaculture, they've successfully boosted fish production, created new jobs, and improved food security.
These examples really show that innovative solutions can come from both policy changes and, those grassroots initiatives.
Yeah, it's a combination of both. And addressing challenges like those low yields, the gaps in infrastructure, and limited access to credit, those are going to be key to unlocking the full potential of the sector.
It seems like it requires this multifaceted approach, involving everyone from policymakers to scientists to fishing communities, even to consumers. Are there any specific policies or schemes in place that are trying to transform the fishery sector?
Yeah, there's one major initiative called the Pradhan Mantri Matsya Sampada Yojana,
Okay.
or PMMSY for short, and it aims to make India a global leader in fish and aquatic products.
Wow, that's ambitious.
It is. It focuses on developing that crucial infrastructure, providing market support, and importantly, integrating fishermen into farmer welfare and social security schemes.
That's a big step.
Mm.
It really recognizes how important those fishing communities are and their contribution to the economy.
It is. The fishery sector has massive potential, to contribute to economic growth and food security. But we have to make sure that growth is inclusive and benefits everyone involved. And that brings us to deep sea fishing and all the debates surrounding it.
Right. Our sources mentioned the Meena Kumari Committee report, which looked into all the complexities of deep-sea fishing in India. Can you tell us more about that?
Sure. So the Meena Kumari Committee was set up to really examine deep sea fishing. They submitted their report back in 2015. And they recommended all these measures to promote things like importing technology, attracting foreign investment, and developing the infrastructure needed to support deep-sea fishing operations. The goal was to really modernize the sector and leverage that global expertise.
Hmm.
But at the time, there were already these existing policy guidelines that define deep-sea fishing based on distance.
Okay.
So anything beyond 12 nautical miles from the coastline was considered deep-sea fishing, not necessarily based on depth. These guidelines allowed for private investment with up to 49% foreign equity.
Okay.
And they implemented a 60-day fishing moratorium during the monsoon season to give the fish stocks a chance to replenish.
So the policies were already evolving,
Yeah.
but it sounds like it wasn't without some controversy.
You're right. A lot of stakeholders, including those coastal states, raised concerns about the potential downsides of deep-sea fishing.
Yeah, what?
Well, they were worried about things like overfishing, what it would mean for the traditional fishing communities, and they wanted policies that would protect the interests of everyone involved.
It sounds like there were valid points on both sides. Figuring out how to navigate deep-sea fishing, you have to consider the economic, the environmental, and the social factors.
Exactly. There's no easy solution, but open and honest dialogue is essential. We have to find solutions that balance that need for economic growth with protecting the environment and ensuring social equity.
We've covered so much ground today, from inland fisheries to high-tech deep-sea fishing. India's fisheries sector is incredibly diverse, faces this unique set of challenges and opportunities. Before we wrap up this deep dive, though, I'd love to get your perspective on one final question. So, we've seen how much potential India's livestock and fisheries sectors have, but it's clear that, achieving sustainable growth while also making sure the people who rely on these sectors are doing well is a balancing act.
Yeah.
How do we strike that balance?
That is the big question, isn't it? And I think the answer lies in taking this holistic approach, one that recognizes that economic prosperity, social equity, and environmental sustainability, they're all connected.
Right, they all go hand in hand.
Exactly. So on the livestock side, we need to boost productivity, but in a way that doesn't harm the environment.
Makes sense.
That means promoting those sustainable farming practices, investing in research to improve disease control and breed development, and looking into alternative feed sources that have a smaller environmental footprint.
So it's about finding creative solutions that allow us to increase production without those negative environmental impacts.
Right. And on the fisheries side, responsible fishing practices are absolutely essential.
Yeah.
We need to enforce regulations that prevent overfishing and protect those vulnerable marine ecosystems. And we should be encouraging wider adoption of sustainable aquaculture methods that minimize the impact on the environment.
Are there any specific actions or policies that you think would be particularly effective in achieving this?
Well, one really important step is strengthening those monitoring and surveillance systems so that we can accurately track fish stocks and fishing activities.
So we really know what's going on out there.
Yeah, we need good data to make informed decisions. Implementing marine protected areas can also help to safeguard those critical habitats and give those fish populations a chance to recover. And of course, investing in research is always a good idea to better understand how fish populations work and the impact of our fishing practices. We need that solid scientific basis for making decisions.
It sounds like it requires a collaborative effort from everyone involved. Policymakers, scientists, fishing communities, even us as consumers.
It does. And it's important to empower those fishing communities to actively participate in the decision-making process. They're the ones who are most directly affected by these policies and regulations, and their traditional knowledge and experience is invaluable.
It only makes sense that the people who are most impacted have a say in what happens.
Exactly. Making sure those voices are heard is crucial for creating solutions that are both equitable and sustainable. And, consumers have a role to play too.
Yeah, absolutely.
By choosing seafood that's been sustainably sourced, we send a strong message to the market. And that encourages responsible fishing practices. It's a small but impactful way for individuals to contribute.
It's a good reminder that even our everyday choices can make a difference, that we all have a part to play in creating a more sustainable future.
We really do. And I'm optimistic. I think India, with its history of innovation and its deep connection to nature, I think India can become a global leader in sustainable livestock and fisheries practices. We have the potential to set an example for the rest of the world.
That's a great point, and a really inspiring thought to end on. Juan, thank you so much for taking the time to share your expertise with us today.
Well, it's been my pleasure.
This has been a truly fascinating deep dive.
It's always great to explore these topics, and I hope our conversation today has sparked some curiosity for our listeners.
And to our listeners, thank you so much for joining us on this journey of discovery. We encourage you to check out the sources we've linked in the show notes, and we always love hearing from you, so please share your thoughts and ideas with us on social media.
Yeah, we love to get your feedback.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.